Okay, so here's our view of what we have is just a compressor tank, and it's a pretty simple thing, and this is our WonderWare demonstration. And we've got a compressor tank, we can turn it on and off, and all we do for this simple thing is we turn it on for 30 seconds and then it turns off for 10 seconds. Fills the tank all the way up. Now what we have here is to enhance it is we've got our regular pump, and it has the regular controls with the what we have, if we can look at it really quick, is we've got a regular program that runs behind it. It's a regular Slick 500 program, and that does all the operation of the system. So we are operating off that PLC version. And if we go in here to the main screen, now right now you can see you must have operator's permission to operate it. So right now nothing works. None of our buttons, and these are all buttons. And when we go to the security, we log in as guest. So we'll start out by going through, and this is a security system, or the security screen, which is another form that the students can demonstrate, and that's a good thing for them to be able to do in their portfolio. So Will has a bunch of privileges, and we'll see what he's got. So now I have access to everything. So we'll go back to the main panel, and what we can do is we've got our system status over here. We'll just put in start. Now we're starting, but we're still in the off mode, so it shows a system alarm, but that alarm is just a low pressure bit, and that's basically because we've got nothing in the tank, and that's a soft alarm that as soon as we get something in the tank it'll be fine. So what we can do is we have mode select, and we've got a hand position, which is basically just while I have that, it's a manual operation, so while I have that button engaged, we just want to run the motor. It's for test purposes mainly. Off is where we're at, pretty obvious, and auto is the cycling thing where we run on for 30 seconds, off for 10 seconds. Now if we look at some of the other screens, we'll turn it on here in a second, but then we also have configuration. So if we don't want it to be the 30 seconds on, 10 seconds off, we can configure those numbers. We can also change our set points, and we also have a permission level that's done at the security level to make sure that not everybody can make the changes. So we can also configure it to different values, and that's another function that would be nice to have in your toolkit, so to speak. And then we have kind of a monitoring screen that just shows us actually what's happening. This shows us the tank as it's filling. Right now it's empty, and there's the low pressure signal. This will tell us what we're doing for start and on time, and over here is our pressure gauge. And here we have runtime. Again, it's the number of running operational hours. So now that we're in on mode, we're running. Before we were turned on, this would not have been running. And then we show the number of cycles that we have. Now a cycle is when it goes through, it's 30 seconds on, 10 seconds off. That is one cycle. And we have reset buttons if you have the permission level. We have an alarm screen. Right now we're showing the load tank. Now right now we can turn that off, but again it will come right back on because it's a constant fault. But if you have an LED, you can turn them on and off. These are soft alarms that don't shut the system down. We have critical alarms that do. And then we have a final thing that's pretty neat in WonderWare. You can put in the trends screen, and this will show you real time what some of the signals are doing in real time. Now since their system's turned off, they're not doing much, so we'll come back to this. So now the system's on, but we're still in the off mode. If we put it in hand mode, this should start up right away, and it should start filling our screen. It comes on. Now that arrow is for the airflow, which the motor comes on, then the airflow shows that it comes on. And you can see from the compressor tank that it's starting to fill. Now if we let go of it, it'll return back to the previous state that it was in, which is the off mode. Now before we saw this pressure bit, and it was in red, but since the low pressure went away, it's in blue, and if we just acknowledge it, it'll go away. Our normal operation is in auto, so we put auto on, and then it will cycle through. And let's get rid of that bit. If we look at the monitor, you can see what's happening. So here we're going to say 30 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and that will be one cycle. And over here we can monitor the tank gauge as it's going on. What will happen is eventually, and right here we're filling to 60 psi, and you can see the monitor. This has a little readout. Right now it's at 5 psi, and now the motor's off for its 10-second cycle. On the top here we also have a purge valve, which is pretty much overpressure purge valve. So when it gets all the way to the top, we can purge some of the pressure out the top, and that'll bring it down to a safer level. And that's the way we have it right now. And if we look at this, we're at 288. And we will let it run through another cycle, and then we'll see it's at 289. And what we're going to do to, because this kind of, I guess we need to speed it up a little bit, but it takes a few full cycles to go through before it fills up. And what happens is it fills up, but then it slowly drops off as it's coming up to during the pump off time. And that would be something that would naturally occur inside of a system. And part of that is what we do in the program, in the PLC program. Part of this whole thing, when you put this package together, is you need to create a simulation for, how exactly do you simulate some of these things that would normally happen inside of a fixed program. We have to fill up the tank, we have to empty the tank. Right up here we have these delays for the flow switches, so that even though we turn a pump on, the arrow that indicates flow, or the actual letterhead that says flow, we delay that because it doesn't happen instantaneously. And to develop these simulations is really a great concept for any student, and to show a possible employer, because if you can simulate this, then when you get out into the field, it should work pretty good on the first go round. So we do have a full PLC program beneath the WonderWare, the fancy nice looking WonderWare program. And if we get into the WonderWare, and if we look at this monitor, so we went through another cycle. If we look at runtime, now we're at 291, so we've gone through a couple of cycles while I was explaining that. And now we're starting to fill again. Now, to make it fill a little faster, what we can do, and another good function for everybody to learn, is now I'm going to set it so it fills for 60, and now I'm going to turn the pump off only for 5 seconds. The airflow is going to be okay, and I'll change this so that we'll only fill up to 50 psi. And that'll allow us, rather than 60, that will fill up faster. Now I enter this, and now it's in the system, but it is not ready to go until we have completed a cycle. And again, the full cycle is 1 on, 1 off. So here we're still going to go up to 30, and then we'll cycle off for 10. After we do that, the next one will cycle up to 60 and off for only 5 seconds. And if we do that, that'll allow us to fill up the tank a lot faster. And then we can see what happens when the tank is full, because at that point we still do start looking at some of the alarms and also the purge valve that we have. Now, the one thing that we were showing before is this trends, and what this does is it's in real time, so until you start clicking it, you won't see that. And while I'm not positive what all these lines are, I think the blue line is what the tank fill level is. And over here you can display everything on the same chart. If you wanted to, you can display them on separate charts, but I don't like this too much because the red graph is only between here and here. If you put them on the full graph, they're kind of all combined, but you do have to look over at this legend to see what type of scale you're on. And I think this one is this is the on cycle pump, and I don't know if this is exactly what this is. This is the off cycle. This again is the pressure in the tank, and it occurs with this on cycle. It's moving up somewhat, and again, because we've changed the maximum level it's going to, it's not going to go all the way up to the top here. And also, when we have digital signals, just so they don't peak out at the very top to bottom, we actually show a peak of 1.5, which it never actually gets to. But if we look back here, we're getting somewhat fuller. We might have to go through one more cycle before we see some action with this. But this WonderWare, and the concept I have is, you know, they can take a simple program, but and then you can, just put a couple controls in here. The configuration is really, I think, a nice little feature. If you know how to do that, that's great. That improves your programming skills quite a bit. This monitoring, this is a pretty picture that I guess everybody likes to look at. But if you can put in this runtime, and I don't think even this simple hour meter, I don't know how well all of the students can do that. The alarms is another thing that we don't really do. Security is another great issue. If you can do that, the idea is, if you have this simple program, but you run through this and you show a potential employer and say, this is what I can do with PLCs. I just, it's more than just, turning on and off the conveyor. I have this whole package here that I can do. I think that would be great to show people. And we're going to have to go through one more thing. We're going up to, well, and actually what I can do, because we're at 38 psi, so I'm going to change the configuration again, and I'm going to make us turn off at 40 psi. So then we will hit the top next time. And this is something really good, and this is really an application that an employer is going to want to have you. Let me make sure I got that one. To have you be able to do. Here we're still at we're trying to peak out at 60 seconds and then off for the 5 seconds, because we haven't recycled all the way down. The next time it will be looking for the 40 psi. And here we do get the system alarm for high pressure, and it shows that it has high pressure, but the high pressure goes away. And now we are showing at 40 psi. So now it is going to be looking for 40 psi to fill up, and we are at high pressure. The overpressure purge valves comes on and drops it down. Not a significant level, but it drops it down like 10%. And at this point, we're going to see it continually go into this purge valve cycle, because it's bringing in a lot more air than it's taking out. But that's the way WonderWare is, and it has all these neat little features and tanks, and this is really the thing that they need to do. And the key is they can get a 6-month educational package for free. It costs nothing. They can take all their programs, however simple it is. I mean, this basically is just, I'm going to turn on a dumb little pump for 30 seconds and turn it off for 10 seconds. And yet, after you add in the configuration, the monitor, the runtime, the alarms, security, trends, you've got a whole package. And one last thing, I'm going to turn the thing off here, but there is also with this, and the way we've got it hooked up is we have it hooked up to a data logging function, and this is our SQL server. And if we go into this project, and you can see I've got a number of projects here, and I think what I need to do, I'm not quite familiar, but is refresh this. And if I look in these tables, got a little database in here called periodic, and I'm going to look at the top 100 or 1,000 rows. And this is periodic because it should be logging data every 10 minutes. And if we look at this, and I am not quite sure, well, we're at the wrong timestamp because it is not this time. Here's probably where we turned it on, but we're logging data at 12 after, 22 after, 32, 42, 52, 02, and 12. These are logging data, so you can go back in and take a look at what the data is, what the parameters are.